Well, now we're into the season of bonfires and the hallowed eve of All Saints. So that means fun and chill on the outside, and then afterwards some warm soups and hot suppers inside. Well, one thing that Halloween and bonfire night heralds is the arrival of this beautiful creature here, the pumpkin. Pumpkins will now be in season up until Thanksgiving Day, and I want to show you a recipe for making pumpkin soup. Now, pumpkin doesn't have a lot of flavour of its own, but if it's made into a soup, the texture is really velvety and lovely, and it makes a wonderful soup. Now, what you do with the pumpkin is you treat it exactly the same as a melon, and you cut it up like a melon, and then, just like a melon, you take the seeds out, scrape them off into a bowl, and then your pieces of pumpkin are all ready to go into the oven and be roasted. Now, to roast them in the oven, you need a blast of high temperature. So you preheat the oven to its very highest setting. Now that means you've got to have this, which is a really solid roasting tray, because cheaper roasting trays just buckle in the high heat. So there we are, we're going to put the pumpkin onto the roasting tray in a little assembly line like that, and then before it goes into the oven, it just needs a little bit of seasoning of salt and pepper, and then we're just going to brush it with the merest trace of oil. And you need to have a flavourless oil for this, so I'm using ground nut oil, or that's sometimes called peanut oil, which doesn't have any flavour but helps to give it that nice sort of charred, crusty texture that we're looking for, which does enhance the flavour of the pumpkin. Now that goes into your very high hot oven, and you leave it there for about 25 minutes to roast until the pumpkin becomes tender. Right, now while the pumpkin is roasting, you start to make the soup in a large cooking pot like this. Start off with a large onion, chopped, as you can see, fairly small, and brown it in 1 ounce of butter over a high heat to get it nice and golden. Then turn the heat down to low and let the onion just sweat very gently for about 20 minutes and just mellow down and release all its lovely oniony juices. Then we're going to add 3/4 of a pint of whole milk, 1½ pints of vegetable stock, or any stock you like. You then bring it up to a gentle simmer, and then you add the roasted pumpkin. And what happens to the pumpkin is that it comes out of the oven. When it comes out of the oven, it sort of looks rather like this. The little gondolas have got nice and charred around the edges. And the skin comes off the pumpkin quite easily because the pumpkin's soft. Now when you're roasting it and you want to know if it's cooked or not, just stick a skewer into it. And if it feels nice and tender, then the pumpkin is cooked. Then just chunk it up, as I've done here. And the pumpkin is now ready to join the rest of the soup over here, which is just coming up to simmering point. So in it goes. Stand well back because of splashes. Give it a good stir, and I think we'll have just a little bit more seasoning of salt and pepper. We can do a bit of tasting later. And I think one very subtle addition that's very nice is this, which is whole nutmeg. Grate it yourself, just a few scrapings like that. That'll now come back to simmering point, and it'll take about 15 to 20 minutes to be ready to then be pureed. Right, here's the finished soup, which has been liquidized, but I've also quickly passed it through a sieve because pumpkin does have a few fibrous bits, and now you can see how lovely and smooth and velvety it is. But what I haven't told you, that this isn't just roasted pumpkin soup, it's roasted pumpkin soup with melting cheese. And the melting cheese in this case is an Italian cheese called Fontina, which has a very, very quick melting quality. If you can't get Fontina cheese, then you can use Gruyere cheese, which also tastes good and actually has a good melting quality. Now, really, you should just leave that for 1 minute. Don't let it come back to simmering point, but just leave it for 1 minute, and then take it hot to the table, ready to serve into your soup bowls. Then, as a finishing touch, add a swirl of crème fraîche, or it could be double cream, and a sprinkling of grated Fontina or Gruyere, And that's it, roasted pumpkin soup with melting cheese.